Hello, travelers and tourists. My name is Mark, and I am the local disaster tour guide. That's right, I'm a storyteller whose background is almost as absurd as the stuff I'm about to try to pull off in game. Welcome to a journey through the fantastic world of TTRPGs like Pathfinder and Starfinder, and welcome to a discussion of rare backgrounds in Pathfinder 2e, including my top 10 favorite rare backgrounds that you can use when you're designing your characters. In today's video, we're going to talk about what rare backgrounds are, how they're different from standard backgrounds, and I'm going to share some of my picks for my favorites in the game. Obviously, as part of this conversation, I would love to hear your thoughts about the rare backgrounds that are out there, which ones you've used, which ones you think are very creative or very interesting, and the experiences you've had with them at your gaming table. So I invite you to be part of that conversation, and join me as we discuss how rare backgrounds switch up the formula in Pathfinder 2e. Of course, before we dive into all of that, we do need to talk about backgrounds themselves, as understanding rare backgrounds means you kind of need to compare them to the basic elements of the game. So, back when Pathfinder 2nd Edition was released, Paizo began talking about what they called the ABCs of character creation: ancestry, background, and class. And it's that second step, background, that was intended as a way of representing the life that your character had lived prior to becoming an adventurer. There were a variety of different options. You could be a warrior, you could be a chef, you could be a hermit. There's all kinds of different choices that you could make, but the intention was to provide a way to show some mechanical benefits for the life that your character had lived. Now, one of the great things about the background system in Pathfinder 2e is Paizo implemented a very easy to understand formula for how backgrounds worked. Once you saw a few backgrounds in Pathfinder 2e, it was very easy to understand any future backgrounds you might encounter and know how to incorporate them into future characters you might create. Once you've seen a few backgrounds, you've kind of seen exactly how they're going to work, and that ease of understanding is a major boon in the design of Pathfinder 2e, but it does come with a bit of a downside. Because the design of backgrounds is so formulaic, because it is so standardized, what should be a significant part of your character creation process is kind of easy to gloss over because it is so formulaic and standardized. What should inform a lot about your character could end up becoming just a quick box that you check and move on. So, one of the things that Paizo has done since the release of Pathfinder 2e is they've expanded background options a bit to include uncommon and rare backgrounds that you can take with Game Master permission. Now, we're not going to discuss uncommon backgrounds in this video. A lot of those are often tied to specific adventure paths or things like that, and I am glad for their inclusion in the game, but it is the rare backgrounds that I think offer the most interesting point of conversation. Rare backgrounds do a couple of things. First, they allow you to incorporate some very unique and very memorable elements into your character's story. You can represent some pretty crazy ideas with rare backgrounds, and they offer some pretty compelling characters, and quite frequently, when Paizo offers a rare background, they switch up the formula a bit. They change out exactly what the background gives you, and in so doing, they allow your character to be mechanically distinct in ways that other common backgrounds wouldn't be. So it's that interesting mixture of unique storytelling elements and unique mechanical elements that remain reasonably balanced inside the game that I think make rare backgrounds such a fantastic point of design. So in this video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cover my 10 favorite backgrounds my 10 favorite rare backgrounds in Pathfinder 2e, along with an 11th honorary mention, and talk about what kind of characters they support and what is mechanically different about these rare backgrounds from the common backgrounds you might find. So, with all that out of the way, let's dive into my favorite rare backgrounds in Pathfinder 2e, starting with my honorable mention, which is the Amnesiac background from Player Core 2. This is, honestly in my opinion, Paizo having some fun at the expense of a type of player that many game masters are probably familiar with. I know I've seen a few players over the years that when they come to the gaming table, I will ask them about their character's backstory, and I will get, sometimes verbatim, "Oh, my character has amnesia. I have no clue what happened to them." There are some people who come to the table and they are there to roll initiative and kill monsters, and hey, I get it. Combat is fun, and sometimes that's exactly what you want to do. The nuances of intricate character storytelling is not necessarily exactly what you want from the game, and some players occasionally may deliberately dive into the amnesia angle as a way to kind of avoid that aspect of the game. Now, as much as I may chuckle at their expense here, Paizo has actually taken the time to give players an option if they want to play a character with amnesia. The Amnesiac rare background, again found in Player Core 2, really upends what you expect to get from a background. There are no skill trainings, there are no skill feats in this background because, well, you can't remember what you used to do. Instead, what the Amnesiac background offers is 3 attribute boosts instead of the normal 2. Normally you would have 2 attribute boosts, one that you have to pull from a selection and 1 free attribute boost. Well, the Amnesiac background actually gives you 3 attribute boosts, and all of them are a free choice, meaning they may be assigned wherever you want them to go. You get to pick out where 2 of them go, and then your game master gets to decide the third one based on whatever secret ideas they have about your own story. Now, if I'm being honest, mechanically, I'm not the biggest fan of Amnesiac. I'm not sure if giving up 2 skill trainings and a skill feat really warrants adding +1 to a single attribute. I don't know if that is a fair exchange in my mind. I feel like I'd want the skill stuff more. But if you are interested in playing an Amnesiac, I do think that is an interesting take on how to do it. And I don't think that the background is so weak that it would necessarily undercut someone being effective at the gaming table. So, all in all, I do think that Amnesiac is an interesting option and a little bit of a fun poke at those who are mostly at the gaming table because they don't care about their character's past, they care about their character rolling initiative and getting straight into the combat. But let's dive into the list proper and start with actually several more rare backgrounds that I'm going to be combining into one point. I want to talk about a pair of rare backgrounds from Rage of Elements called Planar Migrant and Elementally Infused. Both of these are intended as a way of giving your character a connection to elemental themes, and in particular the elemental planes. Now, Elementally Infused is probably the more mechanically interesting one because it plays around with the idea of starting with some magical cantrips and things like that. If you're looking for a mechanically engaging option, Elementally Infused is probably a good choice. It represents the fact that your character was exposed to an incredible surge of elemental energy at some point, and they now carry that energy with them wherever they go. However, as fun as that is mechanically, it's actually the other rare option, Planar Migrant, from Rage of Elements that I find the most intriguing. The idea behind Planar Migrant is that your character actually once lived on a different plane. Maybe your character lived on the plane of air or on the plane of fire. You are originally from there, and for one reason or another, you now travel across the material plane. Are you an exile? Are you a nomad? Is there some other horrible event that caused you to have to move away from your home? There's a lot of narrative room to play with here, And I think Planar Migrant offers some really interesting storytelling beats for a character. Now, in terms of the actual mechanics, Planar Migrant is honestly kind of plain. Its attribute boost and its skill trainings are going to be very similar to what you would normally see with a common background. The only thing extra that they do here, when you get to the skill training and skill feats section, you'll get training in athletics, you'll get the Hefty Hauler skill feat, and then on top of that, you'll get the Prescient Planner General feat, which allows you to, on occasion, pull the perfect item out of your backpack because you are an experienced traveler and you knew you would need it at some point, so hey, you already packed it. I actually really like the Prescient Planner feat. I think it's a lot of fun, so I think it's a good inclusion here. If I'm being entirely technical, Planar Migrant is a hair stronger than your typical background is going to be. I don't think it's unbalancing. I don't think it's unbalancing in its design. I do think it's clearly stronger than common backgrounds, but I don't feel like a character with a common background would just suddenly feel ineffective in a game. So I think Planar Migrant can be used, but the real reason I love it is that storytelling beat of you used to live somewhere else that is dramatically different from where you are traveling now. So because of that, Planar Migrant from Rage of Elements takes number 10 on my list. Coming in at number 9, we have the Feral Child background from Player Core 2, and if you've ever played Final Fantasy VI and are familiar with the character Gao, you know exactly why I love this particular rare background. The idea behind Feral Child is you were raised in the wild. Maybe you were raised by wolves, maybe you were raised by some other creature, some other animal, but you did not grow up in the normal society for your ancestry. Instead, you learned to live, survive, and thrive in the wild. This is a type of story that we see a few different places throughout history, and I think there's a lot of interesting character beats that you can pull from this type of character. I will say that the Feral Child rare background is very much designed for martial characters. One of the big trade-offs of taking this rare background is you're only going to get a single attribute boost. You don't get the free attribute boost. You only get the pick one attribute, and you must pick between strength, dexterity, and con, as living as a feral child out in the wild, it is your physical skills that would have been developed, not your mental attributes. Now, also, with this particular background, you don't get a lore skill, rather you get training in nature and survival, that makes sense, and your skill feat's going to be Forager, also very appropriate. And then, in place of your missing free attribute boost, what you're going to get is low light vision, or if you already have it, dark vision, and then scent as an imprecise sense out to 30 feet. Essentially, all of this taken together represents the fact that your character is used to living in the wild, you've honed your body, and you've honed your senses to operate effectively in that environment. Now, the big downside here is Feral Child is not going to work well for spellcasters who are trying to optimize. Even if you're playing something like a druid, you're not going to be able to optimize with this background. That is a little bit of a downside here. Feral Child really feels like it was written with martial characters in mind, but for a lot of martial characters, or if you're willing to play a spellcaster who is a bit behind the optimization curve, I think Feral Child could be a lot of fun and opens up some really good character options and character storytelling moments. Next up at number 8, we have the ability to breathe water as presented by Song of the Deep from Secrets of Magic. Now, the appeal of this rare background is very, very obvious. Many an adventurer has found themselves in a situation where the ability to breathe water would be incredibly helpful. The story of this background is the classic Lost at Sea story. You were on a ship or otherwise near the ocean, and You found yourself being pulled beneath the waves. You were stuck in an environment where you were not meant to go, but thankfully someone or something came to your aid. Maybe a merfolk came and gave you a kiss, or maybe a more mysterious creature intervened, but in one fashion or another, you were granted the ability to breathe water. Essentially, what the Song of the Deep rare background is going to do is it's going to trade your free attribute boost to instead offer you the ability to breathe water. You still get your picked attribute boost, so you can pick from Strength, Constitution, or Charisma. So, unlike Feral Child, there are some spellcasting optimization routes here. But essentially, you're trading one attribute boost for the ability to breathe water. That seems like a reasonable balancing factor to me, and the rest of the background plays pretty much according to standard expectations. But there is a cool little twist on Song of the Deep. I don't think most players will use this unless it's just a really specific campaign, but there is an option. If your character, in that moment where they were granted the ability to breathe underwater, also had their ability to breathe on land taken from them, you can get both of your normal attribute boosts. Yes, if your character is now permanently living below the waves, then Song of the Deep will function more like a common background. There are going to be very few campaigns where I feel like that version of Song of the Deep is actually something someone would want to take, but I do like the fact that Paizo gives us the option, so do be aware that that is available. Another very mechanically interesting and compelling rare background is Magical Experiment from Secrets of Magic. And the premise behind this one is also pretty simple and straightforward. Someone experimented on you. Someone or something did something to you, and now you're different as a result. Now, there are a couple of big changes with this rare background that you should be aware of. First, when it comes to your attribute boost, you're only going to get one attribute boost, and it must be to Constitution. You don't get to pick between Constitution and anything else. You must take Constitution, and there is no free attribute boost, so you don't have a second choice to make. But after taking your attribute boosts, you do get a choice of the results of the magical experiment, how you have been changed as a result of what people did to you. You can take Enhanced Senses, Resistant Skin, or Touch Telepathy. Now, of these, Touch Telepathy is the easiest to explain. Essentially, if you're in physical contact with someone, you can share your thoughts. Situational, but definitely useful. Next up, we have Resistant Skin, where as a result of the experiments you endured, you have become resistant to a pair of types of energy damage. There is a list of energies you can choose from. You get to pick two of them. So, for example, you could pick Fire and Cold, and you gain resistance to that energy equal to 1/2 your level, so it will scale throughout the course of the game. Again, this one is pretty straightforward and easy to understand, but there is some variability based on what kind of experiments your character endured. The final one is a little bit more complex, but probably the most interesting to me. Enhanced Senses is going to do a couple of things. You'll get low light vision, or if you already had low light vision, dark vision, and then you get to pick an imprecise sense that your character possesses out to a range of 30 feet. Now, you could take Scent, like we talked about with Feral Child earlier, but any imprecise sense that exists in the game that you and your game master agree to could potentially be put into place here. You could take Thought Sense, you could take Tremor Sense. You get to pick an imprecise sense, and you have that out to 30 feet. Imprecise senses are often very hard to add to a character, so this is a pretty cool and compelling way to give a character a very unique ability. I really like this, and I think it makes for some interesting choices. Now, to players and storytellers who are interested in using the Magical Experiment rare background, there are a couple of points I want to address really quick. First, let's talk about the skill choices. Magical Experiment is going to give you training in occultism and academia lore, and the academia lore is intended to represent that that's who experimented on you. You know about the people who did this to you. But I don't think magical experiment needs to strictly occur in the laboratory basement of a university. I think that there are plenty of different environments or scenarios where magical experiments could take place. So, for players and storytellers who are interested in magical experiment, I think you could switch out academia lore to whatever group did the experiments based on the backstory of the character. It's a very easy change to make and something that I think could add some flexibility to this option. The other thing I want to talk about is this particular rare background feels a little abusable to me, and I just want storytellers to be aware that I would be careful about the character concepts I allow that make use of this particular background. When Magical Experiment was first published, it had a very noticeable downside in that your attribute boost from the background had to be Constitution. Now, don't get me wrong, extra hit points is a good thing, but at the time of publication, there were no Constitution-based classes in Pathfinder 2e, meaning if you took Magical Experiment, you were denying yourself the opportunity to optimize for your class. Now, the difference between +3 and +4 is ultimately not that big, and I think some people might overvalue just how strong a +4 is. I think starting with a +3 is fine for plenty of characters. So I don't think Magical Experiment was necessarily bad, but there was that very clear, if you want to take Magical Experiment, you are locking yourself out of the optimization route for your class. Then, the Kineticist released. And the Kineticist is actually a Constitution-based class, meaning that with the release of the Kineticist, it is possible to take Magical Experiment and still be fully optimized for the class that you're playing. Is it, game-shattering? I don't think so, but to storytellers, if a player comes at you and they're pitching a Magical Experiment Kineticist, I might be a little cautious because it does feel like they're trying to dance around an intended drawback of this particular game element. So just keep that in mind. Still, overall, Magical Experiment opens the door to some pretty interesting character concepts. I think there's a lot of room for some really great storytelling here. So I really like Magical Experiment. It takes number 7 on my list. Speaking of rare backgrounds that come with some pretty notable downsides, let's talk about number 6 on my list, Anti-Magical, also found in Secrets of Magic. So, this one is, again, a bit nebulous in exactly what's going on, but the idea behind it is your character is resistant to magic for one reason or another, and you are resistant to all magic. Now, they do note in the description of the background that people who have the anti-magical background can still train to cast spells. They can still learn the components, the formulas, the things that they need in order to direct magical energy. In taking anti-magical, you are not necessarily locking yourself out of particular class choices, but you are locking yourself out of certain magical benefits in that anytime you are targeted by something magical, there is a flat check to see if it fizzles. You roll a flat check at a DC of 3, and if you roll a 1 or a 2, it fizzles regardless of if it's beneficial, hostile, or even cast by you yourself. So, for example, if an enemy mage throws a fireball at you, on a roll of a 1 or a 2, you're unaffected. The fireball still goes off, it still hits anybody else who is in the area, but you stand there unaffected by the flames. However, As a notable downside, if your ally is trying to throw out a heal spell to save you at the last second, again, you roll a d20, and if you roll a 1 or a 2, the magic doesn't connect. Anti-magical throws this wild card 1 in 10 chance that any magical effect might just fizzle on you, and that really adjusts kind of the mechanical assumptions of the game. A lot of people, I think, don't like wildcard elements like that, but that's something I really enjoy. So I think adding a small wildcard element in through the anti-magical rare background, I think for the right player in the right group, it could be a ton of fun. I really enjoy it, so number 6 on my list is anti-magical. Coming in at number 5, we have an especially entertaining rare background concept in Time Traveler, again from Secrets of Magic. Honestly, Secrets of Magic and Guns and Gears are the majority of this list, just being honest. But we have the Time Traveler background, and this represents exactly what it says in the name. You are a character who has been displaced in time. You are either from the distant past, possibly from the distant future. Whatever the case may be, you are not from right here and right now, and the exact circumstances that brought you to right here and right now probably have left you stranded in a moment that you are not properly prepared to survive in. The idea of a character out of time is a narrative that we've seen a lot of different places in a lot of different media, and there's a lot of great stories you can tell from this. So just on the surface, the types of stories this opens, I love Time Traveler as a rare background. The attribute boosts for Time Traveler are going to follow exactly what you would expect. The skills is where you begin to see some modification. For the Time Traveler background, you're going to get 3 lore skills, but all 3 of the lore skills must be associated with whatever time you originally came from. So if your character comes from a kingdom in the distant past, you are going to have lore skills that would be appropriate to that kingdom, which may not even exist in the modern time. Then, in addition to your lore skills, you're also going to get an ability called Bend Time, which is once per day as a free action, you can gain the Quickened condition, allowing you to stride using that Quickened action, and basically once per day you get an extra move action out of your background. Altogether, I think this is reasonably balanced. I think it's a lot of fun, and I love the fact that you have 3 lore skills that could be really powerful in a completely different time that may be of questionable value in the present. This may be a little unbalancing. So, storytellers, I'll leave it to you if you would be interested in doing this. But if a player came to me and they wanted to play a time traveler, the time traveler background does not give a skill feat, but I honestly would consider giving my player the dubious knowledge skill feat for free, just to represent the fact that the knowledge that they have may be appropriate to a completely different time. So, dubious knowledge is not part of this particular background. If I was playing a time traveler, I'd probably take dubious knowledge at the first opportunity I had, but I feel like that would be a good addition to this background. It'd be a little more powerful than it's supposed to be, but that's just a recommendation I have. Still, even without dubious knowledge, 3 lore skills, the Bend Time ability once per day. I love Time Traveler. Very flavorful, very fun. Easy number 5 on my list. But let's step away from just spending all the time in Secrets of Magic. Let's move over to Guns and Gears for a moment and talk about number 4 on my list, which is Wished Alive. The idea behind this is, I'm a real boy, Pinocchio. You know the story. The idea that at one time you were a toy, or you were an inanimate object, and then someone wished for you to be alive, and the power of that wish was so grand it actually brought you into a living, breathing existence. Now, yes, you can use wished alive with the Poppet ancestry. That is completely valid, but you don't have to. This could be you were a toy that has been wished alive and now you're human. That is completely valid. Wished Alive gives you the opportunity to play a character that exists because of the wishes of another creature, which builds some pretty good narrative ties for your character from the get go. You automatically have a very strong relationship as a result of this background. That is definitely something you would want to flesh out with your GM, but that in and of itself, fertile storytelling ground. What does the background actually do? Well, your attribute boosts are going to be pretty predictable. When it comes to skills, you're going to get diplomacy as a trained skill, but you're not going to get a lore skill like a typical background would give you. Instead, you're going to get a special action that they don't actually name in the background. I feel like when they update this background, they'll probably name it, so I'm going to call it Fervently Wish. It is a special action once per day. You spend an action to wish for something to occur, and then on the next action that you take before the end of the next round, you get +2 on your next skill check for that particular wish to come true. You know that wishes are powerful. You know how to use wishes to pursue your own goals. So you don't get a lore skill, but you do get the ability to buff one of your skill checks once a day by wishing for a desired outcome. So I think that's a pretty useful ability. It's very flexible, it's very flavorful, and I wasn't expecting a Pinocchio reference in my Pathfinder 2e games, but Paizo gave me one, and I gotta say, I'm a fan. So, number 4 on my list is Wished Alive. Coming in at number 3, we have a background that probably isn't going to surprise you given some of the other entries on this list. We have Cursed from Player Core 2. Your character has been cursed. Now, the majority of that curse has probably passed, but there are definitely some lingering side effects that you have to deal with, and one aspect of this background is you and your GM sit down and decide what those lingering consequences are. What are the minor inconveniences you deal with? What are some problems that may come up because of the curse you have? Cursed literally gives your GM a story relevant thing to annoy you with from the get-go. And I'm probably irrationally happy that that's an option, but from a storyteller's perspective, this is just ground that you can run wild with. You can incorporate a lot of interesting challenges and backgrounds into your character through the use of Cursed as a rare background. So that is what Cursed is designed to represent, and because you're going to be taking this curse, you're going to be taking penalties associated with this curse. Cursed actually comes with, I think, some pretty good benefits on the side. It's going to have fairly predictable attribute boosts. It's going to give you occultism training and curse lore, but then it's going to give you a special ability. It's called the Warding Sign Reaction. This is usable once per minute, meaning effectively once per combat. You can spend a reaction to create your own personal Eldritch sign to ward off harmful magic. This will give you a +2. This will give you a +2 bonus on saving throws against a magical effect, and if it has the curse trait, that +2 increases to a +3. A once per fight +2 or +3 to a saving throw is pretty nice. I like that. And pairing it up with just the fertile storytelling ground that is you're dealing with the after effects of a curse. Absolutely, absolutely love this. I can think of many different characters that can make use of this background, and I will probably play more than a few of them in my time with Pathfinder 2e, so Cursed takes number 3 on my list. Coming in at number 2, we have another background that I think has an incredible amount of storytelling potential, and as a result, makes it really, really compelling to me. But this one isn't dealing with some ancient curse. No, this is dealing with that one person who gets under your skin. That's right, I'm talking about the Fated Rival rare background from the Tian Xia character guide. So, the idea here is simple. For some reason or another, you have a rival, and it is written in the stars. It is a law of destiny that you and this person are going to clash. Every time you meet them, it is oil and water. You just repel one another. This is a rivalry, and it is a rivalry that is going to drive you for your life. Fated Rival requires you and your GM to design an NPC that your character is competing with, and that competition, that rivalry, is a thing of legends. You can already tell why I love this background. Often backgrounds are, here's the family I grew up with, here are my friends, here are the important places to me. Fated Rival is handing the storyteller a custom-made enemy to drop into the game again and again to drive your character nuts, and oh man, I love this. Now, as a background, Fated Rival really messes with the background formula. There's a lot of interesting stuff here. First up, for your attribute boost, you're going to get 2 free attribute boosts, but one of them you get to assign, and one of them your Game Master assigns as a reflection of your relationship with your rival. Then you get 2 lore skills. Again, these lore skills are specifically meant as a reflection of you and your rival and the relationship you have. Maybe you compete in a similar industry. Maybe you went for a similar prize. Maybe you competed for the love of the same woman. Who knows what the case may be, but your lore skills are specifically a reflection of the area where you and your rival naturally compete with one another. Then, in place of a skill feat, you get a pair of bonuses. Now, depending on your circumstances, it will determine which bonus is active. If your rival is not present, you gain the Die Hard General feat, and you gain a +1 on saves against the doomed condition. Why? Because the only person who's going to take you down is definitely that one person you can't stand. This is not the end of your story. However, if your rival is present, it's on. You lose the bonus to saves versus doomed, you lose the Die Hard, and instead you gain a +1 bonus on attack and damage rolls, because guess what? You and your rival are going to clash. You know it, they know it, everyone knows it, it's on. This, I love this background. There is so much fertile storytelling room here, and Paizo even goes so far as putting a reconciled option into this background. If you manage to circumvent fate in one fashion or another and reconcile with your rival, you actually lose access to that +1 attack and damage bonus because you've been reconciled to them, and instead just permanently gain Die Hard in the bonus versus doomed. So Paizo has written enough narrative space that there are multiple possible outcomes to this rivalry, but this is just the kind of ground where you and your storyteller can work together to create some absolutely fantastic stories. So Fated Rival is a strong number 2, and definitely one of my favorite rare backgrounds in the game. But of course, that brings us to the number 1 spot. What could possibly be the best rare background in the game? And I have to say that if ever there was a background written explicitly for every goblin player character I will ever play. It is Tall Tale from Guns and Gears. Now, if you're familiar with certain types of American cultural storytelling, you may be familiar with what tall tales are. They are stories that are designed to be larger than life. They're kind of like old cultural superhero stories. And Tall Tale centers your player character as the main character of a tall tale. You have accomplished something so wildly and absurdly beyond what any character can do, much less what a first level character can do. But you have accomplished something so legendary that everyone knows about it, and you love telling the story of the insane deeds that you have performed. And allow me to say, if this doesn't sound like the personality of every goblin ever in Pathfinder, I'm sorry, you're wrong. This was written for goblin personality, okay? There are plenty of other ancestries and character ideas that can use it, but pretty much everyone I've got is goblins, so. But Tall Tale allows you to concoct this completely absurd story and present it as the background, the introduction for your character. And going back to my commentary on the amnesiac background, the honorable mention for our list, if one flaw that you see with a lot of player characters is the refusal to have a backstory, another flaw you see is the level 1 character that somehow punched out a deity before the story began. You know the players I'm talking about. Tall Tale almost seems custom made for that kind of background, that kind of story. This can't possibly be true. Is it true? Is there some element of truth? I love Tall Tale so much, and you and your game master can spin some truly wild options with this background. The background itself is actually pretty normal. You can take a boost to Constitution or Charisma. You either survive something or you're really good at convincing people you survived something. Then you get a free boost like normal. Your trained skill is Performance, on point for this particular background. And you get the Impressive Performance skill feat because whether or not the story is true, you're definitely good at telling it. The only real change in how this background works compared to common backgrounds is instead of the lore skill, what you get is special access to skill feats. In particular, Tall Tale allows you to take the connection skill feat, even if you are not an expert in society, as a reflection of the fact that the legend of what you have done has spread so far and wide that everyone knows your name. So, Tall Tale to me is just, it is perfection. It gives so much opportunity, so many potential roleplay moments. I absolutely want to play several different characters who are telling tall tales, and yes, again, all of them are goblins, but Tall Tale is my number one best rare background in Pathfinder 2e. I strongly recommend you check it out. But that brings me to the end of this list. Those are my top 10 rare backgrounds in Pathfinder 2e, but the time has come to turn the conversation over to you. Which rare backgrounds do you find most compelling? Which ones have you tried? Which ones do you want to try? And which ones do you think lead to the most interesting narrative and mechanical options for characters in Pathfinder 2e? Jump down to the comments section. Let me know which rare backgrounds you think are worth discussing. And of course, while you're doing that, don't forget to do all the other stuff that supports the channel. Like, share, and subscribe. Check out my Discord, Patreon. All of those links will be in the video description. And before I get out of here, just a quick check-in for everyone who's been following the story of old men who lose fights with gravity. As you can see, I am out of my cast. They have moved me into a brace. My healing is going well. I actually got out of my cast about a week early because of how well the healing is going. They're starting to do some physical therapy and work on my hands, so hopefully within a month, I will be back to normal. But again, thank you to everyone who has been encouraging, has been following along, and supporting me while I've been recovering from my accident. I truly appreciate it. But to everyone who's here, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for being part of the conversation. Have a wonderful day.